All right, so Michael and Tim, I just double checked, and I can see when I go to our YouTube, um, and I can't see it because I'm on my coworker's computer and not logged into his Facebook. We do indeed have viewers. I'm not sure why I can't see if anyone is in the comments feed here, but we are indeed live on YouTube and Facebook. So I think we just can go live, and if for some reason we can't, we've got at least one person chiming in. And so if for any reason it's on, if for any reason we don't see the comments here, the comments or questions here, I know I have plenty of questions I can ask myself, and then we'll have the the recording going forward for prosperity. So I'd say let's get started. So hello, everyone. My name is Tom Wickersham from the Mysterious Bookshop. Tonight, it's my very real pleasure to welcome Michael Sears for his new novel, Tower of Babel, the first installment in which we hope will be a long new series. And he is joined tonight by Tim O'Meara. Michael, top right, though, or top left, I'm not sure what the mirror imaging works out on viewers' screens. I'll soon be gone. Michael spent over 20 years on Wall Street, rising to become a managing director for Payne, Weber, and Jeffries Financial before leaving the business in 2005 to pursue writing full-time. He has written a number of national bestsellers and award-nominated books, and he has won awards, including an Edgar. He's also an avid sailor, and he lives in Sea Cliff, New York, with his wife, poet and artist Barbara Siegel, and their cat Penelope. And it's also my pleasure to welcome his conversation partner, Tim O'Meara. Tim is the author of the Raymond Don't. You know what? This is one of those words that one of these last names.
Raymond Dunn.
Dunn. It's one of those ones that I've always read, and I know it's pronounced a little differently. The Raymond Dunn mystery series about an NYPD cop turned NYC school teacher, the latest of which, The Hook, was published in March of 2020. He's also the editor of Down to the River, a collection of short crime stories published in 2019. And Tim just completed the final draft of the late M. Wallace Heron's thriller Wannabe, which will be published also this spring. And I know Tim will give us a little more information on that. So by all means, please welcome Tim and Michael, and there will be an opportunity to chime in with some questions later. So in honor of Tower of Babel, Michael Sears.
Thank you very much, Tom. Thank you. And Tim, thanks for doing this.
Oh, please, you're very welcome.
Tim and I met at BoucherCon Albany, BoucherCon being the Mystery Writers Readers Convention, Albany being the one that everyone points to as, oh, Albany, and yet it was a really good one because it was my first time out as a published author. I think you were pushing this book at the time.
Actually, yes, that book had just come out, but you and I have the distinction of not winning an award together.
Yeah.
And I didn't show this. Yes. This was my Father's Day gift from my daughter this year.
Oh.
So she's very pleased about that. I didn't want you to think I was wearing Met colors, Michael.
Yeah.
But my daughter did make me a T-shirt. But yeah, you and I didn't win together.
Yes.
In Albany.
Yeah.
But you did win in Albany, and I wish you would tell that story real quickly. I think it's one of the most charming I called my mother stories I've ever heard.
Tim and I were hanging out at a number of these award ceremonies. I was nominated for a few, and I did not win all of them, but I did win the Private Eye Writers of America debut authors award, which is called the Seamus Award. And I called my mother to tell her that I had won this prestigious award. And her response was, "Oh, you won the Irish Award. That's wonderful." And I said, "No, Mom, no, it's SHAMUS. I think it's Yiddish, actually, but no, it's not." And she said, No. You had a cousin, Seamus, SEAMUS. I was like, "No, Mom." At any rate,
You don't have your mother at that point.
it's still the Irish Award in our family. And
actually, in my family too, whenever I tell that story, it's the Irish Award.
Yeah.
And my daughter saw the picture from across the room. I showed her the picture of this event from that night. And you met my daughter many years ago.
Yeah.
From across the room, she knew it was your picture. Just that wonderful white hair you have. And I remember in Albany, I stumbled into the award show, right? And I looked down, and there you are. Like, I just see you. And I was watching you as we both were told that that other woman won the Barry Award. So
yes. Yep. At any rate, I thank you for doing this. You have a project that Tim just mentioned, and I really want to hear more about this. This is a wonderful pandemic story, a tragic story, but a story of real love as well. And I think that's a good intro to what I'm going to be talking about later with my book.
Yeah, don't make a tough guy tear up there, Sears. Yeah, like a lot of people around the world, I lost somebody very close to me, Michael Heron. Michael was not only a good friend, but I never sent off a novel to my editor without it going through Michael's eyes first. He and my wife were just wonderful readers. Michael would call me on my bullshit. I've seen this before. This wouldn't happen. So I knew if I can get it through Michael, I could get it through. Michael read more mystery novels than most people you and I both know. He's the dream reader for us, for the people who do what we do. And Michael and I became very close in a writer's group. And Michael wrote a book called Wannabe that was really good. And we meaning everybody in his life, including the people in the workshop, were encouraging him to go through the book one more time. It needed to one more go through, and the ending was a little problematic. And that was Mike's failing, if you will, as a writer. He hated to go back. He loved to finish things, right? You're laughing because you know this. Any writer out there knows. But so he left this book, and I had it on my laptop. I could see in the corner, Wannabe, latest version. And it was up there for years. I have a very old computer. And when he passed away last May, it took me a couple of weeks, and I went, you know what? This needs to be finished. This needs to get out there. So I called his brother, who lives in Vermont. They just had 2 inches of snow today. And I called his life partner, Carol, and they said, please take it. So I took it, and for 3 months, I collaborated with a dead guy. It was one of the most amazing experiences of my life. I could hear him in my head. If you ever walked into my apartment while I was writing it, you would have called 911 and said, someone's got some issues in there. But it's done, and thanks to the wonderful folks at Down and Out Books, it will be published on May 14th. And out there for the world to see what a great book this was, and really what a great writer Mike was. And just I hope anybody listening out there, go back and finish your book. Just don't wait till you're not here anymore. So that's me getting a little emotional.
Thank you.
Thank you for mentioning that. I appreciate that. And it will be available. I know Tom just said it's going to be available at Mysterious Bookshop. I'm going to be contacting independents, but it's called Wannabe by M. Wallace Heron with my name underneath. I always want to be one of those guys with, you know. Nice was Lee Child with Tim O'Mara, you know. But I will take my name on the cover with Mike Heron any day of the week. So. Yeah.
That's great.
That's my thing.
Yeah.
Now, getting back to the reason we're here, Tower of Babel.
Tower of Babel, if you come from certain communities to the south, to the west, Tower of Babel. And I've also, starting down that rabbit hole, I found other pronunciations as well, Bauble. And deep discussions of whether this this tower from the Bible should be pronounced either way because of the way Aramaic was pronounced in this region or that. And I'm fine with any pronunciation of it, but I grew up in the New York area, and Babylon is the express stop on the LIRR.
Very good. Yeah.
That's why it's Tower of Babel for me. So.
Yeah. I actually mispronounced the word tower. I thought it was tower at first. But I probably shouldn't say that out loud. But boy, you talk about making an immediate impression. I am a huge fan of first lines in books, especially when it comes to mystery novels and just the ability to, you know, grab the reader before they even get a chance to settle in. And boy, you did this. You did this in this book. And I know I'm asking a lot from you here, but would you read the first part of the book, the very beginning for us, please?
I'll read just a tad of the opening here. Little Richie was a hard man to like. Though if Ted had known Richie was going to be dead in 3 days, maybe he would have tried a little harder. Or maybe not. Richie Rubiano was a nasty weasel with a long list of annoying habits. It was a warm Friday in May. The Mets were at home, 3 games up on 500, and the bookies were predicting a sweep.
I just love that first line. I just, you know, it breaks a rule about, you know, tipping your hat about what's going to happen. But what a great, I challenge anybody not to keep reading after that first line. That's how good it was for me. How long did you work on that? Did you fine tune it and, you know?
No, that opening, including Richie's name, all it's been that way from the very beginning. When I didn't know what was going to happen next, but it all fell in afterwards with a lot of work. But that never changed, and I kept going back and looking at it and saying, "Do I need to tweak this? And no, that was a gift from the muses. That it just came right out that way."
Do you remember where you were when that gift from the muse hit you?
There's room if you want to.
Were you actually, because my muses tend to hit me when I'm walking along the Hudson River or avoiding traffic on 9th Avenue. They rarely hit when I'm actually working.
It's funny. One thing that I do in researching is at some point get out and walk the streets, even if it's just a little bit, just to get a feel, a taste. And I've done that in Queens a fair amount for this book. That particular line, I think, just came to me here in my room at some point. So.
Very cool. You know, it's interesting you say that because I I firmly do not believe in quote unquote writer's block. I do believe there are times I don't know what I'm going to write next, but I find that if I go outside and take a walk, especially I live in Hell's Kitchen, Manhattan. If you go out for 5 minutes, you can come back with a short story or a character or somebody who said something funny, and you can just work on that. So that's why I was asking. Most of the best ideas don't happen in front of the computer. They're generated outside. Then I come in and stuff comes in from the other muses that live inside.
The ending of my very first book, I was absolutely stuck. I kept trying to write this confrontation scene, and I just had no handle on it at all. And my character lived in the Hotel Ansonia on the Upper West Side. So I went to the Hotel Ansonia, and I walked through the lobby and walked out the door and followed his footsteps where he would be walking and where he went to meet. And there was a tree, an apple tree or something, down by the river with 3 ravens sitting in it, squawking at each other like crazy and shaking the tree and knocking apples down and whatnot. Anyway, all of that made it into the book. The squawking of them, all of that just gave so much color to that moment. And then I could write the confrontation. Yeah. It flowed after that.
Yeah, I've often said that if you when you live in New York City and you do what we do, writer's block means a street that 3 authors live on. Well, the Ansonia is beautiful, which actually brings me to well, maybe not my next question, but one of the most famous residents of the Ansonia played for a team that you're not a big fan of. Babe Ruth lived in the Ansonia for quite a while.
Yes, he did.
And that's not quite your team.
Oh, no. I am a Yankees fan. I tend to hide it, and in this book, I hide it well.
Well, you hid it very well because Eddie Malloy, the hero of Tower of Babel, is not only a Mets fan, but he's a season ticket holder.
Yeah.
I mean, you talk about a glutton for punishment.
Yes.
I was glad he didn't have Jets tickets. That would have just made the whole book unreadable. I'm sorry, but I think Met fans. I think it was kind of nice. And listen, I'm a Yankee fan. We haven't won anything in a while, but your book has so much Queens in it. He had to be a Mets fan.
He had to be a Mets fan.
And the Mets epitomized to me the wait till next year attitude that you really kind of need to have to be a successful resident of New York City, any one of the 5 boroughs. But tell people why Queens. You could have chosen anywhere for this book, really. Tell people why you chose Queens.
20 years ago or something, I spent a couple of years doing side projects in real estate with another guy, and he had somebody who covered Brooklyn. He had somebody else who covered Manhattan, and it kind of fell to me, you want to pick up Queens? And I said, sure. What did I know? Queens was something that I drove through on the LIE or took the train through, and that's how I commuted. When I lived in the city, when I lived in Manhattan, I went through Queens on the way to the beach. Mm-hmm. That was as much as I knew. But during that time, I realized Queens is a really incredibly diverse area. It culturally, ethnically, it's got to be the number one most diverse place on the planet. There are people from every country in the world and every tribe within those countries, whole communities that that have come from a mountain village in Mexico and now all live within half a block of each other here. I mean, this is it's also got a huge Chinatown, a Koreatown that just keeps expanding every year, moving out Northern Boulevard. It's a fascinating place that way. It's also a place with a whole lot of political corruption,
In
tons
New York City, I'm shocked.
yeah, tons of gangsters of all kinds of persuasions and backgrounds, many of whom just prey on their own, but also some, like, you know, the bigger ones, the Italian mafia, the Russian mob, and so on, that that are even borderline legit, that they run real businesses in Queens, and that's their home at this point. And a quick story. I was in the county clerk's office looking at tax liens, flipping through and doing the computer, and a woman sat down next to me, tall, blonde, big hair, and she started working there, and she was dressed a little bit higher end, and surprisingly, you don't see those kind of people at the county clerk's office. And then I realized she doesn't know what she's doing, and she started asking me questions. How do you do this and that? And I started answering, and she says, "Okay, well, look at this." And I look over and I look, and the property that she's pulled up to look at the outstanding tax bill, the family name is Gotti. And a couple of years later, I realized, when she had her own TV show, that this was a member of this family.
Oh.
And I thought, this is Queens. This is, you know, there's Archie Bunker. There's the Forgotten Borough kind of thing, but there's also a whole lot going on just below the surface.
Yeah.
And that made it an interesting opening for me to approach here. And it was new. There are not a lot of Queens books.
There are not. Mine take place in Brooklyn, and I would say many of the same things about Brooklyn that you just said about Queens. I lived in Sunnyside, Queens for a while, and boy, the Irish bars there were just almost on every corner.
Yes.
And they were not far from the Hispanic bars along Queens Boulevard. You could just walk underneath the 7 train, and, you know, everybody's watching the same soccer game, but they're rooting for different people. You've got the Europeans rooting for the European teams and the Central Americans rooting for the Central American teams. I actually walked. Remember the big blackout we had about a year after September 11th?
Yeah.
I got stuck on Long Island Railroad in Kew Gardens, and they let us out. And I was living in Hell's Kitchen at the time, which is almost as far west of Manhattan as you can get.
Yes.
I had to walk home from Kew Gardens to the west side of Manhattan. And it was like out of a Will Smith movie. Everybody in Manhattan is going over the Queensboro Bridge, which is made famous, 59th Street Bridge song by Simon and Garfunkel. And I'm one of the only people going that way. So that's one of that would have been a whole book in itself. And one of the hardest parts of that night was my wife and young daughter were at home, and all the bars, because the refrigeration was out, they were selling beers for $1. And I just couldn't imbibe. I had to go home and rescue my wife and daughter. So that's my heroic story.
That is heroic.
Another thing you bring up that adds to the culture of New York City, another thing you and I have in common, you, at least Eddie Malloy, now that I have to admit that I don't want to confuse you, he likes his beer.
Oh, yes.
And he knows he also drinks locally. In the book, you mentioned Single Cut, Bronx Brewery, and Brooklyn Defender IPA. And I was so impressed that you did that.
His taste in beer, his taste in food are also spot on. All of that contributes to the air of the sense of place in the book, which I really wanted to create to make place a character, and that's going after the food and drink, gets you right into the taste, the smells, the appearance.
Yeah, I mean the first scene made me hungry. You got you have Asian food in a bar called Gallagher's.
Yeah,
that's New York. That's
one of those Irish bars that got bought by a Chinese man as the neighborhood changed, and he instituted a dim sum brunch.
And he knew enough not to change the name either.
Yeah. Because he's still also serving the same firemen from around the corner who come in after their shift, and he's serving the nurses who come in from the hospital 2 blocks away, and it's still Gallagher's.
And boy, you get those nurses and firemen together and step back. It's you do. Clearly, there's going to be another Eddie Malloy book, but I just need you to remember Staten Island has Killsborough Brewery, and Manhattan has the Torch and Crown. So those are free from me to you. You can work them in. I'm sure Eddie would enjoy them both.
Thank you.
Something that did strike me. I was a big fan of the Jason Stafford series. That's where we met because of Black Fridays and My Sacrifice Fly. You have personally a very strong financial background, and you've got two lead characters who have. Well, Jason definitely fell from grace before we meet him in Black Fridays through his own doing, and then you've got Eddie Malloy who just kind of got screwed because of circumstances. So compare and contrast the two. They're both very, very smart financially, and
Ed Malloy is a Queens local boy who, through grit, hard work, and smarts, made it to a position as a junior partner at a top Manhattan law firm. And he married the daughter of a judge whose family ran that firm. And it seemed that his life was golden at that point. And through a number of mistakes on his part, or just the way the world works, he ended up divorced and out of a job, and his Nick job didn't work out. And before you know it, he's at a point where he's doing real estate deals to get by, and just living off of his smarts, but he's even given up his law license.
Mm-hmm.
Ted thinks he's okay. Ted thinks that he can still be friends with his ex-wife. He thinks that he can still have some connection to his old ways, and yet live in a pretty much of a monk's existence. He's not all right by any means. He needs salvation. He needs to refine his moral core. But like I say, he thinks he's okay. He needs to be really shaken up about it.
And
Jason, on the other hand, comes out of prison at the opening of the book. Yeah. He knows he's at the bottom. He knows he's got to find something to change. He's lost his money. He's lost his wife, and he finds it in his 5-year-old autistic son, and that's what brings him out of it. That's right at the beginning of the book. Then it's more complications in that afterwards. for Ted, he needs to be hit over the head. He needs to the murder of his research assistant, Richie Rubiano, is only the first of a number of incidents pulling him to open up to the world and to really start his life over again.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope that, I hope he gets there.
As if you would have any control over what Mr. Malloy does. I did like his ability to, for lack of a better term, attract strays that help him out, that end up being very useful. And it's not only endearing as a characteristic of his, it really helps you move the story along. It's not just him.
We find out once again, right in the first chapter, this is no spoilers, that he found his research assistant, Richie, because Richie was a really bad street con man who was trying to run the kind of scams that most New Yorkers stopped falling for by middle school. And then the guy's kind of hopeless. He's a sad sack. And yet he continues to believe in himself, and Ted sees that and kind of brings him along. So, and yet he is still a weasel. But there are others as well. Ted ends up with a cast of Queens oddities that some you might find other places, others not so much. They're I think unique to this part of the world.
Mm-hmm. Now, one of the things that I know we're talking about the new book, but you and I did some events way back when, and I just, for who's ever listening, I need to compliment you again with when I read Black Fridays. I taught special ed for 30 years. I worked with kids at camp with special needs. Before you and I think I had our first conversation, I knew that you had an autistic person in your life. You didn't just go online and go, how do autism affect kids and whatnot. Jason's son was very important to you to get that right.
Yes. I not in my immediate family. I have two cousins on the spectrum,
right.
And I feel for them. I feel for their parents, and I'm also fascinated by it and how it's autism so easily identified now that we know, and yet it is also so unique. It is to each individual.
That's what I really liked.
Yeah.
And the relationship between Jason and his son, and that had happened after Jason had been in prison for a while. And now you not only have to learn to be a father again, you have to learn to be the father of an autistic child, and you're not getting help from. Another distinction I really liked was Malloy's relationship with his ex-wife and Stafford's relationship with his ex-wife. Couldn't be more different.
Yes, they could.
You know.
Yeah. And Ted Malloy and his ex, who is now remarried to a woman, have middle of the night conversations. They watch movies on Turner Movie Classics together and talk about them on the phone at 2 a.m. This is a part of his life, and
they try to get to Met home games.
Mets fans and go to Mets games together.
Yeah, that part I had a little bit of a problem with. I love the old movies, but I'm not sure if I could bring my wife to Citi Field. So
Citi Field has the best food.
You know what? Both stadiums
there are amazing.
Yeah, I'll give you this: the Mets needed a new stadium. The Mets needed Citi Field.
Yeah.
The Yankees did not need a new stadium, but both of them upped their food game because I think they, somebody has to pay for Giancarlo Stanton and Garrett Cole.
Yeah.
The Mets' highest player right now, is it DeGrom?
Sorry?
Is Jason DeGrom the Mets' highest player? Oh,
Yeah.
And Lindor. Somebody's got to pay for Lindor, so you might as well put a Shake Shack in there, and the Italian hero place. It's not like growing up where you got the $2.50 hot dog and a soda, and you were happy to sit down and stand up and watch the game. Now it's an event, especially in New York. So. Tom, I think you're on the other end. Do we have any questions that Michael and I can't see?
Oh, I did my due diligence and covered the
There you are.
camera and everything. Actually, well, since we didn't put the call out for questions, we would now welcome them. I guess I would be curious to know how. I'll jump in with one of my own, Michael, which is, I don't think you really touched on, in some ways, just kind of the most basic premise of the book. You alluded to a lot of it, but your main character kind of, his career after his fall from grace is this very specific, but I assume very real occupation of essentially tracking down unclaimed inheritances, kind of like these properties, these monies that are kind of wind up in a legal limbo, and then basically connecting them with the rightful heirs and taking a little bit of a cut as the finder, which I thought was a fascinating, and it's an interesting field where it could be seen as slightly, predatory, but essentially it's acting as a middleman or a finder without the recipient knowing there was a finder. And I was curious if, what went into that, beyond Queens itself and everything, kind of what went into that research. And I don't know if you were a lawyer before you entered finance, but it's just such a specific world, such a specific job. I just was curious to hear a little more about the real world of that.
Okay. By the way, when I finished the book, and I had a number of readers who gave me really good feedback on before my editor at Soho saw it. Tom was one of that small band who was really helpful in pulling this book together in the final stages. So thank you for that. And to answer your question, this was one of a handful of things that I did at one point. Learned it from a guy who has spent his whole career in the real estate business and exploring all kinds of different things in it. And I didn't want to write a how-to book on this, but I did want to give the flavor of people on the edge of making a living, keeping themselves going with the pieces that fall away that no one notices. If in New York City, if you default on your taxes or whatnot, or your mortgage, and eventually the property is sold at auction, there's nothing that says that people can't bid more than is owed on it. This doesn't happen regularly, but it happens, and that money is surplus money, sits there, and there's no one, not your lawyer, not the state's lawyer, no one has any incentive on going back to the original owner and saying, by the way, we left $30,000 on the table back there. It's yours. There is no system for this. If it stays there forever, the state takes it. Your lawyer is glad to see the last of you because he had to sue you to get paid. No one is looking out for you. And that's where Ted comes in. He has someone doing the research, finding these opportunities, and then Ted goes out and finds the original owner, whose first response is usually, "No, I lost that property. That was the worst 2 years of my life. Don't even talk to me about it." And they need to be convinced that, no, really, there's money there. You need to go back and look for it. Ted does not. Ted focuses on commercial properties because on personal properties, on personal houses and whatnot, the stories are always much too heartbreaking. So he ignores those. But
I liked, actually, it was an interesting almost twist on the classic private eye novel where no divorce work.
Oh,
It's sort of the equivalent of that.
Yes.
It's, I don't want to get mixed up in that kind of messy, dirty work. And forgive me, even though I think I tempered my original question / explanation for the audience. I did not know that you were involved in it, but I think that I mentioned the word predatory.
It's not as pleasing.
Yes, I was not implying. I mean, in fact, in some ways, it's quite the opposite. It's re-engaging parties who had no idea they had a stake. But I mean, it is a fascinating, legal procedural element. Because it's funny, I've had a few, I have to explain this book to customers and people calling and say, "Oh, this sounds interesting. What is it?" It's a private eye novel, but it's got this kind of great, Queens City background and very interesting legal elements. But it's not what you would consider a legal thriller. It's not a courtroom thriller, but it has a fascinating backdrop of the law and kind of this whole web of how the law plays out in certain instances that you wouldn't necessarily associate with a thriller, but you make it very exciting.
Also, the central MacGuffin of the book is a real estate development project, a huge real estate development project that is going to destroy a whole community. That's one end of the real estate business industry, whatever, in Queens. At the other end are people like Ted Malloy going around for the picking up whatever they can and making a living at it.
I was going to say, hearkening back to the classics, Raymond Chandler, Dashiell Hammett, your guy, Ted Malloy, is not used to playing in the quote unquote big leagues. Like when he becomes aware of this property, he looks at the value and goes, "I want nothing to do with that." And then situation is such where you don't have a choice. And I think about, I'm just finishing reading The Maltese Falcon for the 20th time. And the money that Marlowe's looking at is like, what Sam Spade is looking at is like, wait a second, that's a hell of a lot more than, running a skip trace or getting $50 for the evening to see if your wife's cheating.
Yeah. No, this is Ted's commandments for how he handles his business. One of which is, no private homes. But another is avoid the big ones, because there's always a story. There's always something hidden there that is going to come and bite you, and it does in this.
And it's probably a lawyer.
Yeah.
Well, so this is another question, first for Michael, but then I'd be curious to hear Tim's answer too. Is, not that I haven't read plenty of spectacular detective novels where it's just there's a killer, a detective is tracing a killer. But, I'm thinking of, this book, and I know, Tim's work where there might be, if you might not, it might not be beating you over the head with an issue, but that there is some there's some subject, some angle that you haven't seen that, like what comes first, chicken or the egg? Like what comes, have you conceived of your books as just starting to write a new detective novel and then sort of figured out the story as it goes along? Or have you sometimes been drawn towards, I think that there's a really fertile ground in this whole, unclaimed property, kind of network enterprise, and this could be something that I can graft a detective novel onto, not to imply that one is more important or undermines the other, but I'm just sort of curious if how you've approached your books, both of you.
For me, there's got to be the crime or the murder, whatever, doesn't have to be central. That's the story that I build around. What's central is what fires my passion, and in this case, it's the arrogance of a developer that is prepared to really wipe out a community of people who are never going to be able to afford to live in his new building. It's really going to be a monstrous change. And as I was writing this book, and some people said, "Wait, a huge tower like that being built in Corona, Queens? No, I don't believe that." And before I finished the book, I found out that there was a project in Astoria that's still being argued about and still being fought in the courts for a huge tower going up in a very mixed community that was going to destroy that community, and it's what my book is about.
People who don't live in New York City, and I do live in Manhattan, they just don't get that in other parts of the country. They would see a big building going up as a big plus, but they don't see all the people who are displaced.
I mean, I'm curious to hear more of. Well, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Tim.
No, I was going to add on to your question.
Well, so, I want to hear your answer too.
This clearly made Michael angry. This kind of displacement of the people who really make up Queens. With my latest Raymond book, I tackled two issues that were really pissing me off at the time, and it was opioid addiction and the white supremacy movement. And then, the murder gets things started, and then, my guy's a school teacher. He gets pulled in because he knows people, and he knew the murder victim, but he had no idea which way it was going to go. So, after, even with the first book I shouldn't talk too much about the first book, but the last four were all about something that I already had Raymond. So I said, what's pissing Raymond off this time around? And you come up with a murder, and then you work out, you throw a rock in the middle of the pond and the ripple effect. And I'm so glad Michael used the word MacGuffin. My mother watched the 39 Steps a couple of weeks ago and got the Ben Mankiewicz introduction and called me the next day to explain what a MacGuffin is. So I'm so glad you used that phrase. Yeah, everybody thinks it's about the murder, but it's really not. There's so much other stuff going on, and that's why Michael's book. I just read it's 104,000 words. If it was just a murder, it's 20,000.
I'm also curious. So I don't know. I know, Tim, your series is set in Brooklyn, but you live in Manhattan. And actually, I think I may have seen you pre-pandemic. Are you a regular at the Knickerbocker?
No. but there's a lot of sentences you can start with. Are you a regular at? And the answer would be yes.
Well, it made sense to me because it was, near the Strand, and I know I've seen some other writers there. But I was on my way out the door, and I almost said hi to someone who apparently was not you. So I'm glad I stayed myself, and this is the first time we've half seen each other since. But I know you're both. I don't know about you, Michael, but I know you. I don't know how long, if you did live in Manhattan or in New York City, presumably for a long amount of time. But do you? Again, I think that it's always fascinating when people talk about, not just talk about, but really exemplify the neighborhood as a character, which I think is always something. When I think of a lot of my favorite crime novels, it's what you've both just discussed. It's both whatever, there's a certain issue, and it doesn't need to be too it doesn't need to be beating you over the head with profundity, but there is like a certain issue or theme. And then a lot of times what I remember is I like the momentum that a crime novel gives to a story, but I'm still remembering characters, I'm remembering places, I'm remembering the food they're eating. And so I'm curious, again, I don't know, Tim, you're a little bit closer to Brooklyn maybe now, and I know that's very close to you, but Michael, also, why you chose Queens, and I know you said you visited, but it just very rich territories that, as much as they're part of New York City, which obviously everyone's familiar with, you're exploring them in depth, or exploring sort of uncharted and at least crime fiction areas.
I was born on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. I moved out to Long Island because my parents took me there, and came back after college and lived there for 25 years or something on the Upper West Side. And that whole time, Queens was what I traveled through to go to the beach or to come back. And it wasn't until, as I say, I started this real estate project that I actually spent a lot of time there. Before then, Hollis was Christmas in Hollis by Run DMC. I mean, that was as much as I knew about Queens, and it was really eye-opening to see and to be there often and absorb the place.
And I think Michael would probably agree with me. It's where a person lives can tell you a lot about their character. I mean, Ted Malloy doesn't have to live in Queens. It could have been, Michael and I were talking earlier, it could have been Brooklyn, but Michael has a fondness for Queens. I wanted Raymond in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. Doesn't mean he doesn't get out. In fact, in Crooked Numbers, the book that Michael held up before, Raymond makes a point of saying that from Williamsburg, Brooklyn to the Upper West Side is 45 minutes away by subway, but it might as well be on the other side of the world.
Yeah,
that's what I want my books to show, because I get Raymond out of the borough of Brooklyn. I'm sure the further Michael goes with the Ted Malloy series, we're going to see him. I don't think everything's going to be in Queens. You see the buildings from there,
At the western end of Queens, Long Island City,
huh?
is now
hot.
It's with high rises and
That's
expensive restaurants, because it's one stop from Manhattan on the subway.
Yeah, it's easier to get to Queens, to get to Long Island City and that Vernon Street 7th train than it is to go to Harlem.
Yeah.
So people are jumping across, and boy, so there are some ugly ass towers that went up there, Mr. Sears.
Yes, indeed.
Right by the trains.
And conversely, at the other end of Queens, there are people who refer to Manhattan as the city.
The city.
And they've never been there, and they won't go.
Yeah.
And they have no need to do that. ever in their lives. So
that was the same in Williamsburg with my kids. They would call it the city, and I would go, "You don't go there," and they go, "Well, it's dangerous."
yeah,
Okay, said the person living in the housing projects, but people are, people in New York City get very familiar with their neighborhood. I spent many years on 9th Avenue in Manhattan in Hell's Kitchen. If you asked me about a restaurant on 8th Avenue, I really don't know how much I could have told you about that. I was a 9th Avenue guy. I can't spend money every place. There's only so many bar owners I can help send their kids to college. So,
Well, it's funny you said, Tim, that people outside of New York might not understand putting up a new building as an obstacle or something to be opposed. But actually, where I live in Crown Heights in Brooklyn, there's lots of people opposing a new high-rise.
right, because they live in New York City. Crown Heights is New York City.
Well, yeah, but also that it might, because they argue also that it might cast shadow and essentially destroy parts of the botanical garden.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
Which, for a sequel, that's something that I think Kenzie would certainly be protesting against. So
absolutely, yeah.
Meanwhile, in Jefferson City, Missouri, they can't get somebody to fill the vacant Sears building that's been empty for 6 years.
Yeah.
But Amazon wants to put up some stuff in Long Island City that would have displaced many, many people. So,
well,
I'm angry too, Michael Sears.
I'm by no means cutting you guys off. If Tim, if you have any final questions for Michael or vice versa, and I can see. Apologies. I'll tell our audience this is one of our first times using StreamYard, and first I couldn't tell that we had viewers until I checked the other platforms. But I thank you all for tuning in, and if anyone does have a question, we can see them if you want any final questions. But otherwise, if you might type them, I'll just say again, thank you so much to Michael Sears for joining us for Tower of Babel, and he visited us at the store. We have signed copies available at mysteriousbookshop.com, or if you come in, or feel free to call or email us directly. And Tim, I hope if he's able to visit us, we'll come and sign copies of his collaboration of the posthumous M. Wallace Heron thriller Wannabe.
That's a definite. I'll be there.
Have in a month or so, and we'll certainly make that available. Again, please, any final words, and we'll see if we have a final question. But otherwise, thank you. This was fascinating. I appreciate both of you joining us tonight.
I'll just say something real quick. I've been following Michael on Facebook, obviously, and just all the independent bookstores that have been so kind to you, Michael, during the pandemic. And if you want to comment on that.
Thank God for the independent bookstores. Every one of you, thank you. A quick question for you. What's next?
For me?
Yeah.
I'm working on a high school-based crime drama that has the internet. The cloud is actually a character in the book. I'm going.
Wow.
It's not a Raymond book, and it's been a struggle. And because I've never told a non-linear story before, and this is nice though. I like this. At the age of 59, I'm teaching myself to write a non-linear story. and saying that's okay, Tim.
Yep.
So, and obviously, I hope I'm going to assume there's another Ted Malloy.
Working on the next Queen's book. Yep.
Excellent.
That's where I'm at. This time, focusing more on the immigrants and who make up so much of the book and of the populace there. So
excellent.
Thank you very much, Tom.
Yeah, I think it says it in the in one of the opening passages, and I think I even fact checked it, that it's Queens is one of it may be hard to define, most diverse places on Earth. And Michael's book definitely does a good job of portraying that for just all of the different populations that are together in such a dense part of New York City. So it seems like there's an an infinite realm of possibilities to explore there, and I'm looking forward to reading many more of them.
Great. Thank you.
Same
Well,
here.
thank you, Michael.
Thank you all for coming.
Yeah,
Thank
again,
you. And whoever else is out there, thanks.
yeah, mysteriousbookshop.com, or the store is open. You know, we have Michael's book and you have Tim's books, and you know, hopefully we'll have news of Tim signing his new project for us in the near future. So
Very soon. Very soon.
yeah, so thank you all
Thank
so
you.
much. Good night.
Thanks.